Some of my helpers will be handing out some of these handouts. I'm one of those teachers or people that I feel like if I hand it out beforehand, everybody's going to know everything I'm going to talk about. We'll all look ahead and figure everything out, and I don't even have to say anything. I'll just say, let's be quiet and read the paper. But I'm going to talk a little bit about some, very different area of grief and loss in my own life. And I know so many of you have a deeper loss, a deeper grieving that you have had to go through, be it with losing a loved one. In a very unique way, I think it's pretty unique in my situation. All of my grandparents, parents, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, relatives are still alive. I'm almost 45. This coming Thursday, I'll be 45 years old, and everybody's still alive. We've been very blessed in my family. And so when this grief conference came along, and Monica invited me to be a part of this and to have this conference here, I thought to myself, what am I doing here? Why am I asked to talk about grief and suffering? Other than as a priest, as a pastor, we deal with this on a regular basis. I was just saying earlier, we have here at St. Patrick's and in the surrounding churches that we're trying to cover right now, 4 funerals in 5 days. And to sit with those people and to meet with those people, to meet with many of you that I have met with before funerals and things is a very powerful thing in my life. But I thought to myself, one of the probably most recent things that I probably am still grieving today, that is another level of grieving, and not in losing someone, but kind of in the sense of losing someone, is an experience that probably only a priest can experience. And that is the experience of leaving a parish and going to another parish. Now, some people might think that's a great thing, like, whew, I'm done with that. Fresh start, right? But it's difficult because as a priest and you don't have a wife and children, the parish become your family. They become your closest friends. They become the people that you spend the most intimate moments of life with, right? You're with them at the funerals. You're with them at the birthdays and the baptisms and the weddings, and you share life together. Well, 2.5 years ago, when I was assigned in Ord, Nebraska, someplace that's been in the news a little bit in the last couple of days, unfortunately, very unfortunately, but I was assigned in Ord, Nebraska, and I was my first pastorate. I'd only been there for 3 years, and I got a phone call on a Saturday afternoon, and Bishop Hannafelt said, Father Brown, I'd like you to pray about being moved to North Platte, Nebraska. And I was kind of shocked. Only after 3 years, normal assignment for a priest is about 6 years. So it really caught me off guard, and he said, no, just pray about it. I'll call you in a couple of weeks and kind of see how things are going. Well, needless to say, I went into confessions and Mass. I don't remember anything happening. And I remember after Mass this overwhelming sense of loss, this overwhelming sense of grief, and I fell on the floor in the chapel in my house, and I cried and cried and cried. Because the realization came to me that I was about to lose my closest friends, that I was about to lose my family. These people who had brought me in and loved me as my first parish as a pastor. And so eventually I started to pray through that. And that's when I gave you guys what I think is probably one of the most helpful things for me. And in my work as a spiritual director and working with people in grieving and trying to help them on the spiritual side of grieving, is I handed out this little sheet, and it's really about ARRR. And I like it because it's so easy to remember. I have it written in my Bible. I have it written in my prayer book. I have it written in different places just to remind myself of the importance of ARRR and how important that is in healing. And so what happened when it was announced that I was going to be leaving North Platte, or leaving Ord and coming to North Platte, is I had to become aware of the feeling of loss, So I think sometimes, even as I met with families yesterday for a funeral that's coming up next week, sometimes I think right when we first experience the loss, when the loss is really fresh, we're not aware of everything around us. It's kind of like we're living in this twilight zone, right? I'm sure many of you know it's hard to comprehend everything and to be aware of everything that's going on inside of us, because we're just dealing with the things we have to deal with, right? Yesterday I'm talking with a wife, and she can't think outside of anything other than these immediate plans for the funeral for next week. But I'm aware, and I pray that she becomes aware of what's going on inside of her in the midst of all of this. So what's extremely helpful is to become aware of what is going on inside of us, and sometimes that happens later on. So it was 3 months until I actually had to leave Ord, and so I was still becoming aware of all of these emotions of losing my family, in a sense. Being torn away from my family and knowing that I'll never be sent back to this place again. That I'm not going to be as intimately a part of the family that I've been in this family for 3 years. That have loved me and brought me into this. So becoming more and more aware. And then what I realized what was so important is that I needed to relate this. I needed to relate this to someone and to God especially. I needed to relate this to God. Whatever I become aware of is going on inside of me. We know those, all of those thoughts, feelings, desires that are going on inside of us. A feeling of loneliness, a feeling of I'm gone, they don't love me anymore, all these types of things. There's all kinds of feelings and thoughts and desires that will come up in our hearts, and to become aware of those and relate them to God. And that was the most healing part of that, is relating that to God. But then I thought I was kind of done with all of that grieving and all of that relieving of and relating everything to God. And the time came for me to leave Ord. And so I knew I'd come here. I visited with Father Golke here, and it was time for me to leave. And I had my last Mass at my parish. I had a small little school with 55 kids and 5 teachers, just a nice small community. And all the teachers came to my Mass there that last day on whatever it was, June 30th. And there wasn't a dry eye. We couldn't stop crying. We just loved each other so much. And this idea of losing, and this idea of having to say farewell. The next thing I remember was getting in a truck with a trailer full of my things and driving from Ord to North Platte, which, if you don't know, it takes about 2 hours and 15 minutes. And I cried the entire way here. I just couldn't stop crying. And I finally pulled over, kind of out by Mariah's house on the side of the highway over there by the tower north of town. And I just said, all right, come on, Josh, you got it. You can't walk into the office showing these people in this new parish how much you hated leaving the old place, because they're looking forward to you. But I'm sure there was a grieving going on here too, right? And I experienced that people really grieved the loss of Father Jim after 10 years. I've only been here 2.5 years, and I still hear many stories, and people come up and say, well, we were free last weekend, so we thought we'd go up and see Father Jim. And at first, I am aware that kind of shoots a dart at my heart, but then I know they love Father Jim. You love your priest, you love your pastor, whatever church you go to, you fall in love with your pastor because he's there in all those moments. And all of this kind of really became real for me on that drive from Ord to North Platte. And I realized that third step there is that I needed to receive from him. I acknowledged that there was something going on in me. I related all of my feelings, thoughts, feelings, desires to him, but I also needed to receive from him that consolation. I also needed to receive from him affirmation that I am loved here in a new place. Affirmation from him that I'll have just as much beautiful memories and family and people to love here than I did in Ord. In fact, 4 times as many people here as I did in Ord. So many more people. But I had to receive. I had to let myself receive. And I think that's an important part for all of us. As we acknowledge what's going on in us, and we relate it to God, please God, and we relate it to friends, which is another aspect of gathering all of us here today, to be able to talk with others and relate to others. But then to be able to receive. To place ourselves, and I call it a posture of receptivity. To be in a place in our lives that we're ready to receive. To receive God's grace. To receive God's love. To receive what we need to go on from God the Father, the Almighty Father who has so much love and consolation to give to us and to rain down upon us in our prayer life if we're able to relate that to him and then receive. And then finally we respond. The last step there is to respond with trying to move forward in life. And that's difficult, right? Trying to move forward, but after I got here and I unpacked my bags and I moved into the rectory and to spend the first evening kind of unpacking in the office. So anybody that knows me knows that I can't sleep if I've got boxes around, and so I pretty much stayed up until 2 in the morning unpacking so that I could wake up the next day and I'm here. I'm settled, I'm done, I'm ready to go. But that was part of how I had to just kind of respond by, I need to go. I need to move on. And I thought that I was done and that I was moving on. And of course, but we all know that even though we might think that the healing might be done, and we might think our grieving might be done and our suffering might be done, there are certain times in our life where it comes back up again. There are certain events or certain things that might trigger that grief or that suffering or those memories in our heads again that might almost bring us right back to where we were before. So, I've been here 2.5 years. A month ago, that pastor that replaced me in Ord was Father John Kakrazil from India, was removed from the parish. And he was removed from the parish because we were told that there were struggles with alcohol and depression. And it just hurt, you know? All those feelings of those people that I love, and I'm thinking to myself, they need a pastor. You know, at first my selfishness thinks they need me. And then God reminds me, no, they don't need you. North Platte needs you. But they need the healing and a pastor up there. And then, of course, very sadly, in the midst of just realizing how that hurt me when they lost their pastor, and they've had to have a retired guy and a different guy every weekend, which is difficult. Then 3 days ago, we hear on the news, and we're made aware in the diocese that same priest was accused and arrested of first-degree sexual assault. I tell you, that tore my heart out. All the feelings of love and loss and all of that came flooding back in again. So what did I have to do? What have I been doing for the last 3 days? What did I do for an hour this morning at 5 o'clock in my holy hour this morning? I did just this. I acknowledge that there's a hurt inside of me. I acknowledge that I'm terrified to even hear of who this person is that was assaulted. But I'm also just afraid for them, and they're feeling alone. And I know their feelings, and they're feeling like, well, who are we going to get as a pastor? So I acknowledged all of this in me, and I related it to God. And I received from him the great consolation that I need to know that I am where I need to be, that I am blessed here in North Platte, but that God will send them someone to love them and to bring this healing that they need to begin to repair the hurts and the damage that have been done there. And I received that from God, just to continue to receive that so that I can respond by coming here and being able to stand up before you and talk about this hurt that's still very fresh. This wound that I thought had already scabbed and healed over, and you know, sometimes you can kind of still see that scar of maybe on your knee when you fell when you were a kid and broke your knee open, and today you can still see the scar, and I thought it was all scarred over and it was all fine, and today it feels like it's an open, festering, bloody scar again. But in order to go through it, in order to continue, this is the process that I use, and this is the process that I feel is the most helpful in the spiritual life, is to acknowledge what's going on in us. No matter how many years it's been since our loss, since our grieving, maybe no matter how long it's been, to acknowledge every day there's something new going on in us. And to acknowledge that. It's real. The thoughts, feelings, desires are real, right? I tell people all the time, you can't argue with feelings. If somebody says, I feel alone today, you can't say, oh, no, you don't. You do. And you can't argue with that feeling. So to take those feelings and acknowledge them and then relating those to God, which is probably one of the most important steps, is just telling God, you know what, I'm alone. I feel alone. I know it's not true because I know you're with me always. Jesus said, I'm with you always, even until the end of time. But I feel alone. and to just acknowledge that and relate that to God, and to receive from Him the love and consolation that He wants to give us, to receive from Him the assurance of our loved ones and that they're being taken care of. Just like these people that I love so much in Lord. And then to respond with our lives and trying to pick ourselves up and move on. Because as we all know, we can't just stay there in that place of grieving. It is a process, as we've heard, but we also have to respond by moving forward and moving on. So I hope and I pray that you'll be able to maybe fold this up and put it in your prayer book, maybe put it in your Bible, whatever is the most helpful for you, or wherever it might just remind you. And then just, if you do like I do, just write those letters A-R-R-R all over the place, to just remind you to acknowledge what's going on inside of you, to receive from the Father, to relate to Him, to relate it to Him, to receive from Him, and to respond with your life. I think it's been very helpful for me, and so I just really wanted to share that with you today as a means of maybe helping you in the spiritual side of your own grief and suffering. Thank you.
Thank you, Father.